to love the other as ourselves.
Well, it's an honor to be here tonight, by the way. I have to admit, though, when you've been fasting and not drinking, right, it's hard to see the water right here on the table. Makes you wonder who all is in need tonight. I'm also, just one addition to my bio, I'm also the pastor at Community Church of Wilmette. That wasn't in there, and so my group is here, and I'm still the pastor there if they'll have me, of course. So the rights of those in need, when Dilnaz asked for me to speak, it was such an honor to speak. As soon as she told me the topic, I thought, oh my gosh, it's going to be so easy because there's so much material out there. And then she said, you have 8 to 10 minutes to speak. And it's hard because they're within, especially the early movements of Christianity, this question of who are those who are in need. And the rights of those who are in need is such a central topic within those communities as they are forming. And in fact, I was looking through some of the different Gospels. So it's the Gospels for us in Christianity are Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And each 4 of them are written about Jesus by different communities themselves. And the thing that they keep going back to, especially in Luke, because the focus in the Gospel of Luke is this idea of those who are poor. And it points out Jesus, and it pictures Jesus as one who is poor. Right? He's born of poor parents. There's a passage in Luke 2:24 where Jesus' family offers a pair of doves or 2 young pigeons, depending on your interpretation, instead of a lamb, which is an indication of their poverty as a family. Right? Or Jesus did not seem to have an abundance of wealth in his ministry. And one of his famous lines in the Gospel of Matthew 8:20 is where Jesus says, foxes have holes, birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. Right? Also, Jesus shows in one of his central teachings there, one of his central sermons is that of concern for the poor, where he speaks of the blessedness of the poor, right? The poor, blessed are the poor in Luke 6:20. In Matthew 5:3, though, it's blessed are the poor in spirit. So again, pointing out the fact that it's not just lack of wealth, but there's this wider circle of those who are in need. Also, in Luke 7, there's this part where Jesus sends one of his disciples out to John, right, his cousin, who's in jail, and he wants to report out to John what is going on, all the things that are happening in his ministry. And one of the highlights that he gives is, and wonders that he wants reported to John, was the fact that the poor had the gospel preached to them and that they participated in it. So there's this early picture for those who are starting out in Christianity. This as the communities begin to form, which happens after Jesus is dead, as these early churches start to pop up, of how the person they are remembering and the person that they're following wasn't just calling them to care for the poor, but was poor himself. Right. So the rights of the poor, it lays in the very core of that. There are several different responses to that too that have happened over our Christian history. Some of them good, and some of them that we're not as proud of as well. One, of course, is this idea that pops up really in the 19th to 20th century, which we begin to call the social gospel, which is this idea that as we're looking at those who are poor within society, that the gospel is preaching to change the systems that are at hand to help those who are poor. Right. So this idea was that society itself was oppressive to those who were poor, and how we could be able to change those things. There's a theology that comes out of Latin America, of course, that of liberation theology, and it's described as an interpretation of Christian faith out of the experience of the poor. Right? It begins to really take root in the 1950s. It continues today, and in fact, it's the idea of those who are oppressed. Actually, the best way to describe it comes from Justo Gonzalez, and actually Catherine Gonzalez as well, that summarize it as, when they're looking at the Bible, they say, first of all, is it true that most of the Bible is written from the perspective of the powerless, right, and the oppressed? And they say, surely that is the case. So that's the idea behind liberation theology. And we have one of our members in our church, actually, who is going for his doctorate, and he had an interaction with one of Gonzalez's students, and he was saying, how could you tie up liberation theology in a nutshell? And he says, it's what happens when you read the Bible on an empty stomach, and it's been empty for days, and there's no food in sight. So there's certainly within Christianity this conversation of the rights of the needy, because in many ways we see these scriptures being written for and about those who are needy themselves. Right? And one, in reading one of our holy texts, right, I wanted to read from Acts, which is it's a continuation of the Gospel of Luke. It's sort of like Luke part 2, but it's about the early church. So again, after Jesus is dead, but the formation of these communities. And one of the passages that I think is so telling of one of the early communities is when they talk about what they were doing for the needy. Right? And so this is in Acts 2, beginning in verse 42, and it's the believers devoted themselves to the apostles' teachings, to the communities, to their shared meals, and to their prayers. A sense of awe came over everyone, and God performed many wonders and signs through the apostles. All the believers were united and shared everything. They would sell pieces of property and possessions and distribute the proceeds to everyone who needed them. And every day they met together in the temple and ate in their homes. They shared food with gladness and simplicity. So here in the very beginning, one of the central things, and sometimes I think, as we can say in all of our faiths, right? Sometimes people waver from what we see as the central teachings, don't they? And here, one of the central teachings is it's revealing, of course, that when we talk about the rights of the needy within Christianity, it's also this idea that we open up the doors. It's not that we're going out to necessarily help people because we're there to help them, or because it makes us feel good. It's because we're opening the doors because people who are in need are very much still part of the community and on par with us as well. Thank you.